Hi everyone, it's me. Today is a big day because we are going to be tier ranking every single book this year, and that is quite a few books. So just looking at my Goodreads, it looks like I have read 83 books this year. Some of those were rereads, so I think it's more like 76 unique books. And yeah, that's basically today's video. I don't think we need more info other than that. Basically, I read a lot of books this year. Most of the books I did read this year were pulled from the Goodreads top trending lists or BookTok recommendations. So I feel like I don't know, I read popular books and that's what I do. So I thought it'd be fun to tier rank all of them today. So we are by the computer. Here we are making a new tier list. Let's make the categories a little bit more fun though. So there are a couple books that I know will stick with me forever, and that's gonna be our top tier. Will stick with me forever. Don't like capital letters. Our next ranking is gonna be like really great books, but maybe, you know, I'm not thinking about them day to day, but I think the books were really good. So we'll call this would definitely recommend. Our next category is gonna be for books that maybe I enjoyed, but didn't really make too big of an impact for me. So these were fine. The one under that I'm gonna use for books that maybe I didn't really enjoy, but I could see why other people would. Like, it just wasn't my style. Meh, I'll pass. And then our last category, honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna be putting any books in this category because, I don't know, I feel like I'm just not that mean of a person. I don't think I've ever actually given a book 1 star on Goodreads. I think like my lowest books that I didn't like, I've given at least 2 stars. So we'll see how we feel today if we're feeling mean, but I'll call this last category should not have been printed. And that's so mean, so I don't know if I'll be using that. Those are gonna be my tiers, and I do have all of my thumbnails for all my books that I saved. There are so many, so it's gonna take a bit to load those up. Also, it is December 16th on the day that I'm filming this right now, so I'm probably gonna read a couple more books before the end of the year, but yeah, I feel like this is good enough, right? Let's begin. I'm kind of nervous, but I'm also kind of excited. So, oh, we're starting dark and sad with A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Starting off strong, guys. I always mess up saying this last name and I can't read it, I can't see it in this little square thumb. Hanya Yanagihara. This book was so popular. I read this in January, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was like the first book I read this year. And when I first read it, I gave it a 4.5 star because, I don't know, I thought it was a good book because it made me really sad. And I was like, if a book can make me feel so emotional, it must be good, right? But I don't know, now reflecting back on it, it just made me feel sad. There were no ups and downs. I don't know if I learned anything from the book. It was just a whole pile of sadness. So I don't know if it's really a 4.5 star anymore for me. And honestly, I think I'm gonna put this into meh, I'll pass. Because I do not want to feel that sadness anymore, and I would not recommend that on anyone. I'm sorry. Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake, an author with honestly so much promise, and I always want to love her books, but I didn't love this one. I just found there was something missing. I didn't like the characters. I felt like the story in the book had potential. I think Olivie's writing is really good and poetic, and I love the way she writes, but I have an issue with how she tells her stories. Like, I don't think her stories are structured very well. Maybe that's the problem I have with her books, but I didn't hate it. I think I'm gonna say this was fine. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So I read this book this year because I knew the movie was coming out and I wanted to read it before the movie, and honestly, I enjoyed most of it. I think the ending was a little abrupt for me. I know a lot of people out there have a problem with the ending of this book just because it's not a happily ever after, but like, you guys, don't you know the premise of the book? Like, it's about President Snow and how he became President Snow. So I knew this book wasn't gonna have a happy ending, but I just found the end of the book, it just happened very suddenly, and I wish I could have seen more of like how all that played out. But I'm gonna put this in, this was fine as well. Crown of Midnight. Okay, so if you guys didn't know, you probably know this already, but I did get into Sarah J. Maas this year. I did discover her universe. I did fall into the 15-book spiral that is her world, and I'm so excited for January. Oh, for the next Crescent City. I did read the entire Throne of Glass series this year, so we have a bunch of these. I wish they were all grouped together, but Crown of Midnight I honestly really loved, and I think that's an unpopular opinion. I don't know if a lot of people loved Crown of Midnight, but for some reason I loved the story. I'm not a Kale girl, but for some reason I loved Crown of Midnight. I don't know, it was just really exciting to me. Crown of Midnight will stick with me forever. I'm gonna do it. Next we have A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is the 4th book in the ACOTAR series, also by Sarah J Maas, and a lot of people call this the Christmas special, and it's so true. Nothing happens in this book. It's really small, it's a novella, but I thought it was really fun to read. It was nice just like hanging out with our favorite characters and like not having anything so emotional and traumatizing happen to them. So I did like it, and I know a lot of people skip this book, which is like crazy to me. Like, why would you skip a book in a series? Like, just read the whole thing. So if you are reading the ACOTAR series, don't skip it. I don't care what other people are telling you. Nothing much happened in this book, but I think it was important in setting up the next book, which was A Court in Silver Flames, which was Nesta's POV. So yeah, I'm not gonna say meh, I'll pass, but I'm gonna say A Court of Frost and Starlight was fine. A Court of Mist and Fury, I don't even have to like discuss this. This book will stick with me forever. It just peak fantasy romance, okay? I don't think I have to elaborate any further on that. Crescent City, also by Sarah J Maas. There's a lot of Sarah J Maas in this list. I found this book really fun. I feel like at first when I was reading it, I was kind of like not into it, and I was like, no, this is not for me. I wasn't really vibing with the whole urban fantasy thing, because all of other Sarah J Maas books are like super high fantasy, medieval castle, fae land, and Crescent City was like in a city with like condos and cell phones and TVs and like reality TV shows. And I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it for the first like 3/4 of the book, and then all of a sudden, you know, things start going nuts in the last 100 pages of any SJ Maas book, and I found myself like really into it. And there's one part where I started just like sobbing, and so yeah, overall I think I really enjoyed this book, even though I was in such denial. So I'm gonna put Crescent City in would definitely recommend. I don't know, there are characters in Crescent City that I love and will stick with me forever, but I don't think I connected with them that much until the 2nd book, which should be on this list. There it is, House of Sky and Breath. I'm sorry, I'm gonna skip the line and I'm just gonna put this up here. Will stick with me forever. Also, that final chapter in House of Sky and Breath, I still have not stopped thinking about. So yeah, will definitely stick with me forever. This video actually might be a lot quicker than I thought it was, because I did reread the entire Harry Potter series this year. These books I have read so many times in my life, but it's been like several years since my last reread of the entire series. So yeah, I decided to take that on this year, and I read all of them. Why are there 2 Half-Blood Princes? Did I mess up? So they're all, I believe, on this list. Maybe I'll just dig them all up. And I'm just gonna put them all up in Will Stick With Me Forever, because honestly, they will. I don't know why there's double Half-Blood Prince. Where are the rest of them? Prisoner of Azkaban. I can't find them. I can't find them. Oh, Deathly Hallows. There's Deathly Hallows. Am I like blind? Why can't I find? Okay, Chamber of Secrets, I'm gonna put would definitely recommend, because I think it's my least favorite in the series, and honestly, I'm sorry, it just compared to the other ones, it doesn't stick with me. Oh, Goblet of Fire. There they are. Order of the Phoenix was really controversial for me when I first read it, like years and years ago when it first came out, and I feel like I didn't really understand it when I was younger and reading it, but honestly, on my reread this past year, I grew a newfound love for Order of the Phoenix, and I loved the journey that it was, and I loved the emotions and like the darkness and the depth of it. It's so funny. I hated this book as a kid. I didn't understand the emotions. I didn't have the emotional depth yet, but rereading it, so good. So younger me would put Order of the Phoenix in would definitely recommend, but current me, this will stick with me forever. I think those are all of the Harry Potters. No, we're missing Philosopher's Stone, but we also have double of Half-Blood Prince, so maybe I just saved the wrong thumbnail. I apologize. But moving on from the Harry Potter world, Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid is the next book. This is actually one of her older books. I know Taylor Jenkins Reid became really popular for like Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, the Carrie Soto book, Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six. Ugh, so good. But I did kind of go back into her older books this year. I really love her writing. I think this book, which one was Forever Interrupted? I honestly, I don't remember which one this one was. I read 2 of her books this year. Oh, this is the one where he died. And that's not a spoiler, that's literally like in the plot synopsis. This book made me really sad because it's about this girl, she just gets married, and then like a week after their wedding, her husband goes out on his bike and gets in an accident and literally just dies at the beginning of the book, and it was so sad that I had a hard time enjoying this book because I don't know, it was just too sad for me. So I'm gonna put this in this was fine, because I do think the story was beautiful and like the healing and everything. Taylor Jenkins Reid just writes so well about like self-healing and growth and stuff. So yeah, it was a beautifully written book, but I was very sad reading it. Ashes in the Star-Cursed King. Okay, I did say I wasn't gonna use the should not have been printed category, but I think I'm gonna put this down there. I'm so sorry. This book is by Carissa Broadbent. It's the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxa series. Personally, like for me, okay, and I don't mean to offend anyone by saying this if you did like this book, because we all just have different opinions, but it was just such a bad sequel for me. I feel like all the characters were just like not consistent. They weren't being themselves. They weren't like being written as themselves. And I think I've said this before, but in this book, I just feel like things were happening, but at the same time, somehow the plot was not moving forward as things were happening. So it was just a lot of confusion for me. And after I read this book, I decided that I wasn't going to continue with this Crowns of Nyaxa series. I didn't like it. I'm sorry. Back to Sarah J. Maas, we have Empire of Storms. Ugh. This book was so good. I did do the tandem read, so I read this book for quite a while because it was like the whole back and forth thing between this and Tower of Dawn, but it was so good. And that ending ripped my heart out. That moment alone will stick with me forever, so it's up there. Next is Lunch in Paris by Elizabeth Bard. I think I talked about this book as well in another video, and I had a really strange experience reading this book because while I was reading it, I thought it was fiction, but it's actually like a memoir, an autobiography. So I was reading it as a fiction, and I was so confused because there was no plot. And while I was reading this book, I was just like, what is the point of this book? What's the story? Where is the plot? What is going on? And then I realized after I finished it that it was non-fiction, and that's why there was no plot. It was just more about self-discovery and like inner thoughts. I'm gonna put this in meh, I'll pass, but maybe if I read this as an autobiography, maybe it would have been fine. Next up, One from an Enemy by Olivie Blake, who I've already talked about, and I did like this book more than Alone with You in the Ether, and it had a lot of promise. I loved the first half of this book, but the story just like fell apart for me in the second half. There were so many plot holes, so many things that just were happening and weren't explained. Yeah, putting this in these were fine. Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. I had so much fun reading this book. It was absolutely nothing that I expected. If you've read Christina Lauren before, she's very well known for like rom-coms. I picked up this book like just having no expectations. I didn't read the plot summary. I just saw the name Christina Lauren and I love this tag team duo of authors, so I was like, yes, I'll read it. I didn't expect a full like Western style adventure with shoot 'em out scenes and like a treasure hunt. But that's what I got, and I had so much fun reading it, so I would definitely recommend. There is also romance in it, so it's not like fully not a romance book, but it was just something so wild and out there for Christina Lauren that, I don't know, it was a nice, pleasant surprise for me. A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This was the third book and finale of the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and I feel like this book had a lot of controversial opinions online from people that didn't love it. A lot of people complained that they didn't get enough time with the two main characters. They didn't like the ending. I feel like a lot of people had super high expectations for this book, and I did too, but honestly, I really enjoyed this book. I did like it. I did enjoy reading it, but I do see how it could have been better. I think this book should have been 200 pages longer, and that's so rare to say because books can be so long. And I feel like with most books, the problem is that they are too long and they drag on, especially with series. You know how like the first book in a series is always so short, and then like as it goes on it becomes longer and longer and longer, and then all of a sudden you're reading a 1,000-page book. That's not the case with Stephanie Garber books, but I feel like she should write her books longer. So I'm gonna put this in would definitely recommend. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Yamaguchi. I really like this book. I thought it was really cute. Loved the little stories in it, so I'm gonna put this in these were fine. I think it was a cute, cozy read. I don't think it was anything like outstanding or spectacular, but I had a really good time reading these little stories. A Court of Wings and Rune. Honestly, I loved this book. I'm actually gonna group this with the rest of Sarah J Maas. For most people, ACOMAF is their favorite ACOTAR book, but for me it's ACOWAR. I'm like a political fantasy girly, and there was just so much of the politics, the scheming and the planning and the plotting in A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book I feel like also had some controversial reviews. Some people loved it, some people hate it. I am in the group of people that loved it. I think the romance in this was great. I loved the two main characters, but I also really loved the side stories with all the friendships. It was just so happy and cozy with the vacation home setting and all the friendships. Oh, it was so cozy. So I'm gonna put this top tier. I feel like I'm so nice when I rate books because like whenever a book has a happy ending, it's hard for me to rate it poorly because like even if it kind of dragged along to get there, if it has a happy ending, I still love it. The Happy Place was really good for me. It is actually my favorite Emily Henry book so far. Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I'm gonna use my bottom category again. This book just made me really uncomfortable. I know that a lot of people liked this book and I can see why other people would. Basically, if you like really smutty romance books, this would be for you. But it just made me feel really uncomfortable reading it. I did not like the two main characters. And so when you're reading a romance book and you don't like the two main characters, it's hard to enjoy the book. So yeah, lots of uncomfortable moments for me, lots of cringe, lots of like the dialogue was really icky for me and I just didn't enjoy it. So, A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first ACOTAR book. Compared to the rest of the books in the series, it honestly didn't hit me as hard, and I think that's a popular opinion. With this series, like you just kind of have to get past the first book and then the rest of it is so good. So I would definitely recommend A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I'm not gonna say it was like amazing. I think it was really cheesy, to be honest. It was really predictable and yeah, it was fun. It was fast paced, but it definitely wasn't like the best, like top tier. The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hilderbrand. Oh, an author that I just love. Contemporary fiction set in Nantucket with a group of friends that are like in their 40s. Such a feel-good book. I'm going to recommend this book. Oh my gosh, next is Poppy War. I'm still reading this series, so I did read Poppy War very recently and I do have the rest of the series on my shelf, so I'm gonna get into the rest of it and I'm so excited. But this book is by R.F. Kuang. It was actually her debut book, which is so hard to believe. This book was so good. I'm using my top tier again. So many top tier books this year. Next is Nora Goes Off Script. I can't see the author's name in this little thumbnail because it's cropped, but I believe this is by Anna Monahan. And I picked up this book and read it thinking it was gonna be just like a good old 3-star read, a comfort read, a little cutesy rom-com, but I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I was going to. Just the way that the story was written and the characters, I don't know what it was about it. Maybe like the banter was good. This is another book that I read quite a while ago. I think I read it like early summer, so I don't remember the details. I just remember really enjoying this book and being surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So I am going to definitely recommend. We got another Throne of Glass. We have Queen of Shadows, which was so dang good, you guys. This is the book in the Throne of Glass series, I feel like, where things start really picking up and we really like get into the thick of the story. We also like start getting a lot of other POVs from different characters and it was a masterpiece. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This was a very cozy fantasy read, written in a very whimsical way. I feel like the language was very poetic, it was very whimsical, it was very like quirky, and we have a pretty quirky main character, but I feel like the plot was a little weak for me. It was cozy, but it wasn't my favorite, so I'm gonna say it was fine. I didn't really connect to the characters as much as I wanted to. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I really enjoyed this little rom-com, and something specifically I remember about this is that the male main love interest is a character that has social anxiety and like doesn't like to be social and be in crowds and like meet new people and like go out. Like he prefers a nice little cozy date night at home, and I think the little introvert in me really appreciated that in this book because we don't get a lot of that in romance, especially with the male characters. I feel like we get a lot more, I don't know, introverted female characters, but like for main male love interests, usually they're these like big, burly, tall men that like everyone loves and they're just like oozing manliness. In yours truly, our main love interest was like a very like closed off kind of awkward guy, and I really liked that, so I would definitely recommend The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. This book made me like sob. It was so good. I think I'm gonna put this in Will Stick With Me Forever. It hits so hard. This is a military romance. I feel like military is just like Rebecca Yarros's comfort zone when she's writing. She grew up in a military family. She's married to a military guy, so it's just what she knows, and she writes about what she knows, which I think is what makes her books so impactful, because she's really writing from a place where she knows what she's talking about. Like, she's probably felt all of these emotions to some extent. It makes her books a lot more realistic in like the emotions that her characters feel. It was so good. Why is this book in this list? What have I been doing? No, I have not read House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas yet. I wish. I probably just like saved this thumbnail like knowing I was gonna read the book, but I put it in the wrong folder, so I'm gonna put this at the end because no, we have not read that book yet. Okay, Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. I was kind of disappointed in this book, sad to say. I love Carly Fortune because all of the books she writes are set in Toronto, in cottage country, in Canada, and as a little Canadian myself, I just have a soft spot for her. I also think it's really fun when I'm reading her books and her characters go to like a bar or a restaurant in Toronto, or even like a street, and I recognize the name and I know it, and like I've been there and I can really like vividly picture where our characters are. It just makes her books a lot more fun for me to read when I can actually like picture the scenario and the setting. But I will say that Meet Me at the Lake was a little disappointing because I just feel like her two main characters, they just did stuff that I didn't agree with, and I just couldn't get into their romance as much because of that. Don't get me wrong, I think she's really great at writing chemistry, but I just couldn't root for them because of the things they were doing and the way they were acting. I'm so sad to say that I'm gonna put this in meh, I'll pass, but I love Carly Fortune, and she is releasing a new book in 2024 that I will for sure be reading, and I hope it's better than this one. Okay, Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I am going to say this was fine. It was a really fun, cutesy rom-com, but I don't know, I feel like I just couldn't put this book over a This Was Fine because it was about high school students, and I feel like at this ripe old age of 30 years old, it's hard for me to get into like a high school romance because yeah, I'm just not in high school anymore. I really enjoyed Better Than the Movies. I'm not saying it was a bad book, it just didn't do anything special for me. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I love how I said I wasn't gonna use my last category, but I'm gonna put this down there. I picked this up with such high hopes and I didn't like it. I didn't like a single character in this book, which I've talked about this before, and I think that may have been the point. I don't think we're supposed to like anyone, but for me it was just really hard to read such a long-winded story about characters that I didn't like. Like, none of them had redeeming characters to me. I feel like they were all just written really poorly and like one-sided as well. Like they didn't have dimension. The characters were all like caricatures, and it was really, really hard to read. So I was really frustrated while I was reading this book. The Good Daughter, I think this book is called, by Karen Slaughter. This book was like horrific, and I had not read Karen Slaughter before, and like maybe I should have known because her pen name was literally Karen Slaughter. But this book was really gruesome. It was hard to get through, to be honest. I think the story was good. I think it could have been a great book, but it was just, yeah, it was just too gory for me. I don't need to read about all of those like bloody details, so I would pass. Oh yeah, I forgot I read this year. So while I was in my Harry Potter reread craze, I did read Tom Felton's autobiography. I think it was fun to read. I don't think it was anything like too special or extremely well written, but for me, being such a Harry Potter nerd, I enjoyed reading this. I really liked just hearing about his stories of how he got onto Harry Potter, his experience while he was on it, and then also after. So I would recommend this if you're a Harry Potter fan. I don't think it was anything special, so I'm gonna say this was fine, but again, if you are like a really, really big Harry Potter fan, I would totally recommend Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I'm so sorry to say, but this book didn't really impact me very much. I would say I'll pass. I think the story was a good idea, and I think this book had a lot of potential, but for some reason, the way our main characters were written, I just couldn't connect to them. I feel like the story felt forced. It didn't feel like the characters were speaking for themselves. It felt like the characters were being written by an author. Does that make sense? You know, like when you're reading a book and it just feels like you're living the lives of these characters in a good book, but then in like an okay book, you really feel the author in there, and you feel the author making the characters do these things and say these things. That's what I felt about this book. Really wanted to love it, but I couldn't connect to it. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. This book was fun. I'm not gonna say it was my favorite Christina Lauren book, but it was a good rom-com. Very, very, very predictable. This was fine. The Existence of Amy. This is actually like one of the only like non-popular books on my list of books I read this past year. The author of this book, Lana Grace Riva, actually was very kind to send a paperback copy of her book to me. But this is about a woman who suffers from OCD, anxiety, and depression, and has a pretty good story on how she just like tries to live a normal life. I did have some issues with the plot, with some of the side characters just feeling very one-dimensional. I'm gonna put this in This Was Fine. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I really, really wanted this book to be a Will Stick With Me Forever book. I don't know what happened. I enjoyed this book. I really liked it, but from the way that I heard everyone else talking about this book, I thought it was gonna be like way up there, and it was just like 4.5 stars for me instead of 5. So I'm gonna put this in would definitely recommend. I think it was a really good book. I'm still really excited to read Crooked Kingdom, but like, I don't know, I read this book and then immediately forgot about the characters. It wasn't a book where the characters and the story just stuck in my mind forever. The writing was great, the story was great, but for some reason it didn't stick in my heart, and that's just something I can't explain. In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. It was nothing special. It was very predictable. The characters were very annoying. I think if you're in the mood for a silly little rom-com, they're just like better options. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Where do I want to put this one? I think this book should have been printed. I'm not gonna put this down there, but I would not read it again. So I'm gonna put it in meh, I'll pass. I just found this entire book to be very monotone. The narrator was so monotonous. All these traumatic things were happening to our main character, but he was just being like, well, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, but I didn't feel how he felt when these things happened, which is why I didn't connect with this book. The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. I'm just gonna put this up here, and I don't think anything has to be said. Best book Stephanie Garber has ever written, and I will stand by that. Court of Silver Flames, not my favorite ACOTAR book. Not my favorite ACOTAR book. Is this controversial? I'm gonna put this in This Was Fine. I loved Nesta's story. I'm not saying that I'm like a Nesta hater. There were so many good things about this book. For me, there was just so much smut. And again, I'm okay with a good smut scene or two, but I swear half this book was smut, and I didn't feel the romance in this book because it just felt like passion. Like, it just felt like physical attraction. It didn't feel like emotional connection. I couldn't get into it, and the spice I feel like just took away from the story. I feel like if 90% of the smut scenes were cut out of Silver Flames, I would have liked this book so much more, because it was just scene after scene of very, very visual action, and not the kind of action that I wanted to see. Once Upon a Broken Heart, I am going to definitely recommend. Really, really great book. Really, really beautiful world that Stephanie Garber created. I would definitely recommend reading this book, because you have to read it before you read The Ballad of Never After. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't love this book as much as a lot of other people seemed to. I think it was a good book. I think it had a lot of great themes in it, but I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record here. I thought the characters in this book were just so one-dimensional. It was just like, you're either a woman and you are great, or you're a man and you suck. It was just so stereotypical. It was just like so I hate men, that it just like didn't impact me as much as I wanted it to. I feel like if some of, like, I don't know, the evil characters were a little more well-rounded, it might have been a better book. I will say I feel like the writing in it was really funny, it was quirky, and I enjoyed that. I'm gonna say this was funny. Oh, The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I loved this book. I thought it was so moody, I thought it was so mysterious. I loved our like female family in this book, and I think this book will stick with me forever. I have still been thinking about it these days. The Cruel Prince I read recently by Holly Black. I have not finished the series yet. I have only read the first book. I think at this point I would definitely recommend. I enjoyed this book. It is a fae, fantasy, YA type of a book. I feel like it was a really good mix of like the whimsical fae plus like a serious high stakes plot. So for example, just comparing to other books on this list, Sarah J Maas writes like very serious fae books. Her fairies are not like that whimsical fairy folk. They are very much like big, strong, tough warriors. In contrast, for example, in Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, those fae were like very mythological, whimsical, fairy folk type fairies. And then The Cruel Prince was like a perfect balance of both. So we had that kind of whimsical fairy vibe, but also the warrior high stakes vibe. And I really enjoyed The Cruel Prince. I'm really excited to continue on with it. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I have started so many series this year, but I did read A Darker Shade of Magic, first book in a trilogy. I loved it. I thought the world was so cool. Loved all the characters that V.E. Schwab wrote. Really, really excited to continue on in the series. I feel like I've been talking for so long, so I'm just gonna try and speed through. Fourth Wing will stick with me forever. I have a full reading vlog about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I'm just gonna put this up here, so I don't think I need to talk more about them. Finale by Stephanie Garber. There's Caraval. I'm gonna talk about Caraval first. I really loved Caraval, and I feel like Caraval was honestly like, it was underhyped for me because everyone was telling me that I had to read Caraval first before getting into her Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and everyone was just like telling me, yeah, you have to read Caraval first, but it's not as good, so like just get through it and then you can like have your prize with Once Upon a Broken Heart, basically. But I read Caraval and I really loved it, so I would definitely recommend. Very like descriptive magical writing by Stephanie Garber. Where are the other two? Legendary I also loved, and Finale I also loved, so would definitely recommend. We have some more Throne of Glass, so I'm gonna throw Kingdom of Ash up here. I would put Throne of Glass specifically and definitely recommend. It wasn't the best book in the series for me, but obviously you have to read it to like get into the series. Heir of Fire will stick with me forever. Tower of Dawn, so controversial. I'm gonna say would definitely recommend. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm not a Kale girly, so I did do the tandem read. I will say the Tower of Dawn story is very good. It is a great story. There's some good development, but it was too long for me. But again, for those people out there that are saying that you can skip Tower of Dawn, no, you can't. Read the whole series. There's some really important information that comes out of Tower of Dawn that you need to read Kingdom of Ash. Don't skip the book. Same Time Next Summer, also by Anna Monahan. Is it Anna or is it Annabelle? Something. I would pass this book. I think similar to In the Weeds, there are just better rom-coms out there. You don't have to read this one, just read another one. I think Same Time Next Summer also had a really similar story to Love in Other Words, for example, and what was the Carly Fortune book that was like almost the same? It's the same story, but I feel like Carly Fortune and Christina Lauren did it better. We're down to the last row, you guys. So Divine Rivals, I would definitely recommend it. I am sad to say that this book didn't hit me as deep as it seems to have hit other people, and I think, to be honest, it might have been because it was advertised to me incorrectly. The way I was recommended to this book was by people on BookTok saying that if you loved Fourth Wing, you're gonna love Divine Rivals. They are such different books, you guys. Like, Fourth Wing is like high stakes fantasy romance, and Divine Rivals is like a poetic historical romance with like a tiny bit of fantasy. Very different books. Should not have been compared in the first place, but I did enjoy Divine Rivals. I think it was a really great book. The writing in it is beautiful, and I'm excited for the sequel to come out. What is this? Ring. Oh, this was a book that I received as a gift, and I don't think I need to talk about it too much. It was not the best. I'm just gonna put it there. I did read One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns this year. I'm going to definitely recommend both of these. These are by Rachel Gillig. It is a duology and it is completed. Such a good world. It's a very gothic-y, it's a gothic fantasy YA. I talked about this book in my October reading wrap-up, I believe, so again, I'm not gonna talk too much about it because this video is already so long, but I loved these two books. None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This book was very popular this year, but I'm gonna say this was fine. In terms of thrillers, I just feel like this didn't thrill me as much as other thrillers did. I was very intrigued throughout the entire book. It was very fast paced. I read it so quickly. I feel like it's one of those books that had so much potential, but for me, the twist at the end wasn't really a twist. Like, I just predicted everything that was gonna happen from the beginning of the book. And with thrillers, like, I don't know, when you read a thriller, you want to feel twisted, like you want to feel surprised at the end, and the twist didn't twist for me, so I would say it was fine. The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I did already talk about The Ashes of the Star-Cursed King. I will say I didn't mind the first book as much as I disliked the second, so I'm gonna put this in meh. I'll pass. I just think there are better fantasy romance books out there. It was just another one of those books where I feel like the characters felt forced. I feel like the author was telling the story about the characters instead of letting the characters speak for themselves. It was very fast paced, and I know a lot of people love these two books, but it didn't do it for me. Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I'm gonna definitely recommend this book. Very heartwarming story about three very unlikely characters who come together and end up really supporting each other through a self-discovery journey. And after reading this book, I love octopuses or octopi. What is this? Some burnt toast? Oh, this is the second Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I read this year. I think this is called After I Do, but I can't see the title. But I would say this book was fine. If I'm remembering what this book is, it's about a couple that kind of breaks up and takes a year apart from each other to see if they can find their way back together. I don't know, I just didn't agree with the premise of the book, but I do think this book was very well written. I still love Taylor Jenkins Reid and how she writes romance and how she writes emotion in general. It was a fine read. I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't like remarkable. I'm gonna say the same thing about Out of the Clear Blue Sky. I honestly don't remember this book very well, so I'm gonna say it was fine, because I don't remember much about it. Kingdom of Sweets. This was a Nutcracker retelling that I recently read for the Christmas season, and I'm going to pass on it. I had high expectations for this book because I wanted to read a really good dark Nutcracker retelling. It sounded so fun, and I liked the first half of this book, but this book reminded me of One for My Enemy, where the first half was so good. Like, our setup for the world we're in, the situation we're in, our characters, everything was set up really well, and then the plot just like fell apart. Was kind of disappointed about this book. The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater, I'm gonna say was fine. It was an okay Victorian fantasy. I don't think it was anything special. What I really liked about this book actually was our setting. I thought Olivia Atwater just described like our environment very well in this book, so it was really fun picturing where we were, but again, I just didn't really connect to the characters too well. Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, another series that I'm in the middle of reading of. I'm actually currently reading Glass Sword right now, and I'm not going to tell you what I think about it so far because I'm making a reading vlog, but I'm gonna say Red Queen was fine. I think it's a really fun, high-paced YA fantasy, but like nothing groundbreaking, nothing new, nothing too special about it. Red Queen was just really fun to read, and that's why I am on to the sequel right now. Last book of the list. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm losing my voice. Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm gonna say would definitely recommend. It's such a good book. Very long, very intricate, and you have to really turn your brain on when you're reading this book. I'm always blown away by R.F. Kuang's brain. Like, she is so smart. Like, when you read her books, you're like, you are so smart. But yeah, I really love Babel, really love the story, really important, great messages in it, and a very unique magic system. I would say this book is very close to Will Stick With Me Forever, but I'm gonna be honest, like after putting this book down, I have not really thought about the story and the characters too much compared to the other books in that top category, so borderline Will Stick With Me Forever, but just didn't make it by like a hair. And that's it. That is my visual tier ranking display of all the books I read this year. And I did reread these books, or I reread some of these books like 2 times or 3 times this year. I think I read Fourth Wing like 3 times. It was a wild year of reading, you guys, and that's it. That's my tier ranking. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a long one. I need to drink some water. My throat is like but yeah, if you did like this video, please leave me a like and a comment. Let me know if you read any of these books and if you agree with me on my opinion or disagree with me. Looking forward to another reading year. I'm gonna try and read 100 books in 2024, I think. It's a high goal for me, but I think I can do it. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!